How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation. Who say to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, your watchmen lift up their voices, together they shout for joy. When the Lord returns to Zion, they will see it with their own eyes, burst into songs of joy together, you ruins of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord will lay his holy arm in the sight of all the nations, and the end of the earth will see the salvation of God. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. John chapter 1, beginning at verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In our home groups here, if you're visiting, you won't know, but we have home groups that meet throughout the week during, as it were, the term times. And they spend some time thinking together about what we've been learning Sunday by Sunday. At our home group, we had a little Christmas social a couple of weeks ago, and as is customary at these things, we had a bit of Christmas quiz. One of the rounds, we were trying to guess what were known as Christmas dingbats. Now, I'm sure you've seen and know the concept of a dingbat. Here's one that I made earlier. All you have to do is say what you see. It's very simple. So obviously you all know what that means. It's a common phrase. Who's got it? Yes? Foreign language. You can see how it works. For in language. Right? Bit slow this morning. Too many mimosas. This is a really tricky one. This isn't a Christmas one. This is a really tricky normal one. Can anyone, I'm looking at you, you got that one very quickly. Anyone work out what this one is? 0, 2, YRROW. Could be here all day, but that's fine. The turkey will wait. So I have to tell you, this is nothing to worry about. Nothing to, and that's worry turned backwards, about. Nothing to worry about. Okay, so you get the idea. We're warming up. Here's some Christmas ones. This is one, if you came to our home group social, you know the answer. So at the top, fur, here. Zach, you know the answer. I'm not going to ask you. Have a look. It's a common Christmas phrase this time. Fur. I'll give you a bit of a clue. That's obviously the tree. And what's here about? Presents under the tree. Here, present. And there's lots of them. Presents under the tree. Right. Final one. Well, nearly final one. I think this is a bit easy. If you came to our crib service last night, we sang this together. Shh, Sir Galahad. Silent night. Okay, now why have we started with that? That's all I've got for you. Why have we started with Christmas dingbats? Well, I think in John chapter 1, there is something a little bit like a dingbat going on. The thing about a dingbat is, it's mysterious when you first look at it. Can't make sense of it. What is that? That doesn't make any sense. Langforgwich, 02, YRRW, what does that mean? But all you have to do is say what you see. If you just look at it and say what you see, of course, it's that. When it comes to the Christmas story, John a friend of Jesus who knew him probably not around the time of his birth. This is a different John from John the Baptist. But what John, who became a friend of Jesus in his adult life, saw about Jesus, he wrote down in his gospel. And in effect, what he does in that reading is he says what he saw. So on the one hand, what John sees about Jesus is what's summed up in verse 14 with that word, flesh. This is a test of my painting skills here. When John looked at Jesus, he saw an ordinary human being. That's what the word flesh really means. He didn't look at Jesus and see, if you like, an alien from another planet. He didn't look at Jesus and see, I don't know, like a sort of angel who's sort of otherworldly, floating over the affairs of human life, like those angels on the first Christmas night. He saw flesh. He saw an ordinary human being. You know, flesh is one of those things that makes me human. I can look at my flesh and I know that I'm real. I see you all. When I see you, I see your flesh. That's what John means when he says the word became flesh. Not a Superman, not an angel, not an alien, completely human. And yet, of course, that's not the only thing John saw. The other thing that John saw, he sums it up with a word, which is word. Now, do you notice in the reading, if you go, might be over the page, there are things about this figure, the Word, that John spells out in a bit more detail. He tells us that the Word is the one who created everything. He tells us that the Word is the one in whom there is all life. He tells us that the Word is the one in whom the light of reality shines brightest. So John sees Jesus, and he says what he sees. He sees Word and flesh. And then he says, well, got to put the two together. And so it's very simple. The Word became flesh. That's verse 14. He sees Jesus. He sees someone who is human, flesh. But he also sees someone who, well, in the end, he can say those things at the start of the reading that are mind-blowing. But that's what he saw about Jesus. He saw Jesus doing things that only God can do. The Word was God. He sees things, Jesus saying things, claiming things about himself that only God would claim. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite writers, I always quote him, he says this in one of his works: "A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse." John says what he sees. He sees the Word, he sees flesh, and he puts it together, and he comes up with this: the Word became flesh. Now, compared to some of these tricky dingbats, that might not look that complicated. You know, it's not a very clever one, really. You can see that and guess what's going on. But here's the thing for John. There's something really interesting and unique about John, which does make this a really hard thing for him to think. Because John was a first century Jew. And in first century Judaism, there is no way, absolutely no way, that the Word could become flesh. For John, the idea that God would step into our space and time reality would be as mysterious and weird, and it would confuse him as much as you were confused by Y2, whatever that was. What? You heard in Isaiah 52, the promise that God is going to come to his people. But for John, well, he would think that means God's going to send someone into the world. Send a human being, maybe equip a human being with the Holy Spirit, maybe do something extraordinary in history, like he did in Moses' day, raising up the Red Sea to cover the Egyptians or something like that. But the Word became flesh. That would be impossible, even blasphemous. So when John says what he saw, it is mysterious. It is a head scratcher for him. But it's also obvious. Just says what he sees. The Word became flesh. Now, because we're not, well, none of us are first century Jews. I don't know if anyone is Jewish here today, but we don't share the same sort of way of thinking about the world, really, as John did. So this dingbat is less mysterious, less meaningful to us. So let's try and just think about what the kind of weirdness is, as it were, for us today. I need 3 volunteers to be able to read something out for me. Zach, Eliza, and Lorelei, you come up. I need you to stand on this step here, next to each other. And here we go. You are going to be Brian for the next few minutes. You are going to be Norma. And you are going to be, it says Anton, we'll call you Antonia. Okay, now here's the thought exercise for us all. Imagine that this room here is all we've ever known. Forget what I said about fire exits, there are none. This is the world as we know it. There's no doorway to the outside that we're aware of that we can get through. Now, what would you do if you lived in this place? I guess some of us would be resourceful and just get on with life and make the most of it. Some of us would sort of maybe ponder what the meaning of all this is. We look around, we see things that sort of make some sense. Imagine that these 3, Brian, Norma, and Antonia, get together one day and they start to have a little debate about what's going on in the world. They need to shout these out nice and loud. So they start talking, and Brian, what does he say first of all, nice and loud?
I am sure there is more to the world than just this room. I have heard things from outside. I feel like there is someone out there guiding me.
So Brian looks around and thinks, I'm sure that this isn't it. In fact, I think I can hear things from outside the world. It feels to me like there's someone out there guiding me. But then Norma here pipes up.
I am sure there is nothing outside this room. We have to make do with what we have right here. People who think they have heard things from outside are making it up or making a mistake.
So Norma has got no time for Brian. Come on, that's nonsense. Stuff outside the room. But then Antonia pipes up.
Anyone who says they are sure is just guessing. There is no way of knowing either way.
So Antonia is very reasonable. Come on, guys, you can't be sure. You can't be sure. We just have to guess. Well, you might have guessed it. Brian, B, is a believer. Norma, N, is a non-believer. Antonia, at the end, she's an agnostic. Now, just imagine, if we're having this big debate, hope it doesn't get too heated, but we're listening to them, maybe we're all chipping in, when suddenly the door that we thought was locked opens and somebody walks in. What would change? Well, think about it. For all Brian's sense here that, there is something more, for his experience that there's someone guiding him, right now, whoever walked in this room from outside, Brian would have to listen to him. Okay, my experience might tell me things, but now this is the most important person. Norma, for all her logic, her reason, her sort of analysis, now there's a new piece of data to consider that she hadn't thought was there, but he's coming through the door. And for all Antonia's uncertainty, agnosticism, G.K. Chesterton said, the purpose of an open mind is like an open mouth, to close it on something solid. Now, Antonia's got to pay attention. She can't just say, well, we don't know. Someone's come in from outside. Let's give these 3 people a round of applause for their help. You can keep them on all day if you like, or you can give them back to me. Thank you very much for your help. You can go and take your seats. I hope you see the point. We might not be in the same world as John, finding the Word made flesh difficult, but each in our own way, the message of Christmas is going to upend us. It's going to challenge us as if we only lived in this room and someone walked in from the outside. And that's mysterious. If you look at Jesus in the Gospels for the first time, you might think, really? Is that really what's going on? Someone from outside coming in to tell us about what's out there? But John said what he saw. And John is convinced that if you keep looking at this, then it might take a while, but eventually you'll get it like the dingbat. Oh, I see. And even more for that, if you keep looking, you will find it as challenging as those three people would have found the person coming into this room. You'll find in Jesus Christ someone who is worthy of your fullest attention. Someone who is worth keeping on looking at, understanding, making sense of, asking your questions of, challenging, working out, grappling with. Someone who you will never, if you like, exhaust with your looking into. There'll always be something new and strange and wonderful to discover about him. Perhaps on your pew ledge in front of you, there's a little red car inviting you to come along to our Alpha course in January. A few days away now. In January, we'll be having an Alpha course, which is a chance to do just all those things with Jesus Christ, to ask your questions, express your doubts, query, press into, could this be real? Is it a hoax? Is it mistaken? Could this explain the way the world is? Could it offer hope, meaningful, real hope for your life, for our world? Alpha is very simple. We have dinner together. Then we spend a bit of time obviously getting to know each other. We watch a short video unpacking a topic. Is there more to life than this? Who is Jesus? That kind of thing. Then there's time to discuss, ask your questions, or just stay silent and listen to others. You'd be very welcome to come along. You can find the details about how to sign up on that red card. The message of Christmas is joyful, good news, but it might be like a dingbat, a bit confusing, a bit mysterious, and yet John said what he saw, and he calls us to respond to Jesus like he did himself. One way, of course, to do that, as we've been doing today, is to sing. We're going to sing again. Our next carol, Angels, We Have Heard on High. If you're here on Sunday, you remember Gloria in Excelsis Deo. It's the Latin for what the angels sang on Christmas night. Glory to God in the highest heaven. If this is real, it's the perfect response to give God glory for who Jesus Christ is. So let's stand and sing Angels We Have Heard on High.